Inside Pelican Bay, burned alive in handcuffs. Vaughn Dortch scandal exposed, true crime secrets. Scalded silence. If you think this story is intense now, wait until you hear what we uncovered next. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with us as we peel back the darkest secrets of Pelican Bay. The steel corridor hissed with the echo of boots on wet concrete. Inmates called it the C-block tunnel, but guards whispered another name, the Gauntlet. It was where prisoners disappeared from view, where screams bounced off cinder block and nothing leaked back out. On the night of April 29, 1992, the tunnel reeked of disinfectant and burned flesh. Vaughn Dortch had been booked into Pelican Bay's security housing unit as another statistic. A mentally ill black man serving time for petty thefts that spiraled under California's three-strikes law. He was soft-spoken, unpredictable, and by all accounts terrified of the cold, clammy concrete cells. Inmates had seen him mutter to himself about phantoms in the vents. Guards saw only a problem to be managed. That evening, an incident broke out on the tier. A guard accused Dortch of smearing feces on his cell walls, an act of protest or psychosis, depending on who told the story. Within minutes, a team of 6 correctional officers arrived in riot gear, carrying plastic shields and restraints. Prison records would later show the use of force was authorized to extract and decontaminate the inmate. The phrase sounded clinical. The reality was anything but. Witnesses described a blur of motion. Shackles clanked. Vaughn's wrists were zip-tied, his ankles locked in iron cuffs. He shouted that the water burned his skin, but no one seemed to listen. He was dragged through the tunnel to a narrow room known to staff as the rub-down, an old utility chamber retrofitted with a metal tub meant for disinfecting lice-ridden prisoners. The water had been turned up hot, scalding hot. Outside, the prison's public relations unit issued a routine log entry, inmate decontaminated. Inside, the temperature was estimated at 130 degrees. Dortch screamed as steam rose from his skin. His body jerked but couldn't break free. His hands were cuffed behind him, his legs pinned. One officer later told investigators he smelled burned chicken. Another remembered the silence afterward, not from Dortch but from his colleagues. 2 floors up, Lieutenant Karen McAllister, a new shift supervisor, signed off on the extraction without realizing what she'd approved. Hours later she would file an incident report full of euphemisms, hygiene intervention, safety protocol, non-compliant subject. But that night, something about the odor in the hallway made her stomach knot. She had grown up in Crescent City, the small logging town surrounding Pelican Bay, and thought she'd seen everything. She hadn't. By morning, Dortch's skin had sloughed off his thighs and sheets. A nurse wrapped him in sterile gauze while officers hovered in the doorway. Medical notes documented 2nd and 3rd degree burns covering more than half his lower body. When an outside hospital specialist was finally called, he reportedly asked, "What happened? A chemical spill?" Nobody answered. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the SHU inmates. Through taps on pipes and coded kites slipped under doors, they pieced together fragments of the story. "They boiled that man alive," one wrote. "If they can do that to him, what about us?" Across town, civil rights attorney Catherine Hemming picked up a call from an anonymous nurse at Pelican Bay's infirmary. The woman's voice trembled as she described an inmate with burns so severe she'd never seen anything like it. Hemming had been monitoring abuse cases, but this one felt different, visceral, undeniable. She jotted the name Dortch on a yellow legal pad and circled it twice. Hemming's first challenge was simple: prove Vaughn Dortch existed. Pelican Bay's administration refused to confirm his condition, citing security concerns. Requests for medical records were stonewalled. Prison spokespeople gave terse statements about standard decontamination procedures. Yet the hospital's emergency billing code told another story: thermal injury extensive. Inside the SHU, tension escalated. Some inmates refused meals in solidarity. Others etched Vaughn's name into their cell walls with bits of metal. Guards grew jumpy, aware that rumors of the scalding could spark a riot. Lieutenant McAllister, haunted by the smell in the hallway, quietly slipped a photocopy of the incident log into her purse at the end of her shift. It was her insurance policy, or maybe her conscience. By mid-May, the story had begun leaking to local reporters. The Del Norte Record ran a small headline: "Prisoner suffers burns at Pelican Bay." Most readers skimmed past it, distracted by riots in Los Angeles after the Rodney King verdict. But one journalist, Miguel Ray from a San Francisco investigative weekly, smelled a bigger scandal. He drove to Crescent City, sat in a diner across from the prison gates, and started asking questions. What he found was a wall of silence. until he met an off-duty guard who, after 3 beers, whispered, "You want to know about the tub?" Ray's tape recorder clicked on. Back in Sacramento, Hemming prepared a civil rights complaint under Section 1983 of the U.S. Code. She knew Pelican Bay's reputation, the supermax built to crush gangs, silence lawsuits, and bury troublemakers in concrete. But Dortch's injuries were too severe to ignore. Photos smuggled out of the hospital showed pink, blistered skin and vacant eyes. The state's corrections department launched an internal inquiry, but critics called it a whitewash. Key documents disappeared. Witnesses recanted. One officer transferred to another facility overnight. Yet the anonymous nurse kept calling Hemming, feeding her dates, names and medical stats. Each call was riskier than the last. On June 3rd, Ray's expose hit newsstands, "Burned alive in handcuffs? Pelican Bay's hidden torture room." The headline jolted the public. TV crews descended on Crescent City. For the first time, the name Vaughn Dortch trended in California papers alongside Pelican Bay and Scalding. Prison officials called the story grossly inaccurate, but refused on-camera interviews. Inside the SHU, Vaughn lay in a hospital bed under guard, drifting in and out of sedation. He tried to tell a psychiatrist what had happened, but his voice was a rasp. "Hot water," was all he managed before closing his eyes. That same week, a sealed envelope arrived at Hemming's office with no return address. Inside were photocopies of shift logs, water temperature readings, and a handwritten note. "Look at April 29th, C-Block Tunnel." The handwriting was shaky but deliberate. Someone on the inside wanted the truth out. Hemming spread the papers across her desk. If the documents were authentic, they proved the water temperature had been turned up far beyond safety limits and that supervisory staff had signed off. She stared at the signature line. One name jumped out, a name she'd seen before on another case involving excessive force. She reached for the phone to call Ray. But before she could dial, a second envelope slid under her door. This one contained a single Polaroid, a dimly lit room, a metal tub, and what looked like a pressure gauge in the corner. On the back, scrawled in blue ink, were 3 words, "They'll do it again." Hemming froze. The whistleblower wasn't just documenting the past, they were warning her about the future. And if she was reading it right, Vaughn Dortch might not be the last. Whistleblower. The envelope with the Polaroid sat in Catherine Hemming's palm like a live grenade. 3 words on the back, "They'll do it again," burned through her mind. She locked her office door, pulled the blinds, and laid out the evidence in neat rows. Shift logs, temperature records, the photo of the tub, the warning. Someone inside Pelican Bay was risking their job, or their life, to feed her this. That night she called Miguel Ray from a payphone. "Meet me where the foghorn sounds twice," she said. It was the code they'd agreed on after his article broke. A derelict pier on the Crescent City harbor. Ray arrived in a battered sedan, headlights off. His tape recorder was in his jacket pocket. Hemming slid him the documents without a word. Ray flipped through the papers under the pier's sodium light. His jaw tightened. "This is a blueprint for torture," he muttered. "Who signed this?" She pointed to the signature line. "Lieutenant Richard Pierce. He's been named in at least 3 other excessive force complaints that went nowhere." Ray nodded slowly. "If we can confirm this, it's bigger than Dortch. This is a system." Back inside Pelican Bay, Lieutenant Karen McAllister was fighting her own war of conscience. She'd authorized the extraction thinking it was routine. Now she watched Pierce strut down the hallway like a general inspecting troops. His eyes were flat, his voice curt. "The department has our backs," he told a huddle of officers. "Don't talk to anyone." McAllister had slipped Hemming the first batch of records, but the Polaroid was new, and more dangerous. She'd left it in an envelope on a supply cart near the Sally port. If someone saw her do it, she'd be finished. That afternoon a memo had circulated warning staff about media infiltration and disloyalty. The message was clear: leak and you're out. Or worse. Meanwhile, Vaughn Dortch was transferred back to Pelican Bay's infirmary under guard. Bandages clung to his legs like wet paper. A psychiatrist noted possible acute stress disorder and limited verbal response. But when a chaplain visited, Vaughn whispered, "Don't let them put me in the tub again." The chaplain scribbled the plea in his notebook and prayed no one confiscated it. Hemming prepared an emergency injunction in federal court to preserve evidence. She suspected the water temperature logs would disappear unless a judge ordered them sealed. As she drafted the motion, her office phone rang. A male voice whispered, "You're being watched. Stop digging." Then a click. She stared at the receiver. Her building's security camera had been vandalized the night before, lens smashed, wires dangling. She wasn't imagining it. Someone wanted her scared. Miguel Ray published a follow-up article with the new documents but withheld McAllister's name. Official logs show scalding temperatures in Pelican Bay decontamination room, screamed the headline. The story ricocheted through California's news cycle, landing on the desks of state senators who'd quietly questioned Pelican Bay's methods for years. Inside the prison, tension snapped. Inmates in 3 SHU pods began coordinated cell banging at midnight, a deafening protest. Guards retaliated with pepper spray. The smell of capsaicin mixed with disinfectant, stinging eyes and throats. Vaughn lay in the infirmary, trembling at the noise. Lieutenant Pierce called an emergency meeting of staff. "We are under siege," he barked. "No one talks to outsiders. This ends now." His gaze swept the room and landed on McAllister. For a heartbeat she thought he knew. That weekend, Hemming drove to Sacramento to hand-deliver her injunction. A federal judge signed an order freezing Pelican Bay's internal records related to inmate decontamination. It was a small victory. The prison's lawyers filed an immediate appeal, but the clock had started. For the first time, the state could be forced to open its files. On Monday, McAllister found a note in her locker. "Snitches end up in SHU too." It was written in block letters on a scrap of inmate grievance paper. No signature. Her hands shook as she crumpled it. She'd grown up believing in law and order, but now she was on the edge of becoming the very thing she'd sworn to oppose. That evening she slipped into the prison's evidence room under the pretext of an audit. She photographed the decontamination room logs with a disposable camera, water temperatures, staff initials, maintenance requests about boiler recalibration. On the last page she found something new, a requisition for chemical agent trial signed by Pierce. She didn't know what it meant, but it chilled her. Meanwhile, Ray tracked down a former inmate who claimed he too had been decontaminated in the same room. The man showed scars on his thighs. "They don't just hose you off," he said. "They cook you." Ray's editor worried about libel, but the paper's lawyers greenlit the story if they could confirm one more victim. Hemming was already 2 steps ahead. She had found a sealed deposition in another lawsuit mentioning thermal injury at Pelican Bay 5 years before Dortch's case. Patterns were emerging. Late one night, Hemming's office window cracked under a thrown rock. No note this time. She called police, but the responding officer shrugged. Could be kids. She knew it wasn't. By early June, the judge scheduled a preliminary hearing. The state's attorneys moved to dismiss, arguing Dortch's injuries were self-inflicted or accidental. Hemming countered with photographs of the tub water readings and the anonymous warning. "This is not an accident," she told the court. "This is policy." Public outrage swelled. Cable news anchors framed it as California's Abu Ghraib. Protesters gathered outside Pelican Bay's gates with signs reading, "Stop torture in our prisons." Reporters shouted questions at guards entering for shift change. Inside, McAllister made her decision. She arranged a secret meeting with Hemming at a rest stop off Highway 101. Rain hammered the roof of Hemming's car as McAllister slid into the passenger seat, hood up. "I can't let this go on," she said, handing over a flash drive. "Everything you need is here. Videos, maintenance logs, internal memos. But you didn't get it from me." Hemming tucked the drive into her coat. "You're doing the right thing," she said. McAllister's eyes were rimmed red. "No. I'm doing the dangerous thing." She stepped out into the rain and vanished into the dark. That night, Hemming plugged the drive into her laptop. Folders blossomed on the screen. C-block_tunnel, Deccan_room, use_force_ videos. She clicked one at random. Grainy footage appeared. A handcuffed man dragged into the metal tub, guards laughing off camera. Steam rose. The man screamed. She covered her mouth, fighting nausea. The file's timestamp read, April 29, 1992, 1942. Vaughn Dortch. Proof. But at the end of the clip something else flickered into view. A second prisoner waiting outside the door, shackled and trembling. The file ended abruptly. Hemming scrolled through the folder. Dozens of clips. Different dates. Different inmates. She whispered, "My God." Outside her window a car idled, headlights off. When she looked again it was gone. The next morning her phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "You're in too deep. Next time we won't miss." Hemming stared at the screen. She was holding evidence of systematic torture inside one of America's most notorious prisons. But exposing it could cost her career or her life. And in the infirmary at Pelican Bay, Vaughn Dortch opened his eyes and tried to speak. They'll, was all he managed before the nurse adjusted his four. Across the corridor, Lieutenant Pierce signed another requisition form and muttered to a colleague, "Boilers ready. We've got a new one coming in."